and welcome to another A Christmas Carol SAL tutorial. We are working on part 3 today, and we are going to be talking about the backstitching for part 3. So you can see we have the full and complete design here in front of us now. You can see that there is some backstitching in this section. Actually, most of this section consists of backstitching. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I did the backstitching for this, because I did it a little bit different than parts 1 and 2. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so for parts 1 and 2 with the vines and the French knots, I did the backstitching in these sections with 2 strands of floss, just like I stitched the cross stitching with 2 strands of floss. But in part 3 we're going to do something a little bit different. The kind of swirls with the French knots, these are also 2 strands of floss, but the lettering is going to be done with only 1 strand of floss. And the big difference with this backstitching is that I actually did all of the lettering with long stitches wherever I could. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some fabric here and show you what I did for the lettering. This is the same piece of fabric that we did the tutorial for the backstitching and the French knots. I'm just going to go ahead and go above where we stitched. I already anchored my floss down in this section. When you are, working on this, you're obviously going to be anchoring in some of these lines and things here, but because we are working with only 1 strand of floss for the lettering, you are going to have to anchor it somewhere in these stitches. So go ahead and start by doing that. And now, what do I mean by I did long stitches instead of backstitching for the lettering? Let's go ahead and take the first letter. It's the letter I, and if I were to do this in backstitching, I would stitch, again, I can't show the pattern here because this will be going on YouTube, but if you have the pattern in front of you, you can see that in the I, it is made up of several stitching spaces. The lines cover several stitching spaces. They're actually 3 spaces high, by 2 or 3 spaces wide on the pattern. So if I were to do this in actual backstitching, let's pick a place to start. So if I were to backstitch the letter I, let's say I'm starting here, I would come over just 1 stitching space and bring my floss down. Then I would come up over here and come back. Again, that's why we call it backstitching, because we go forward and then we come backwards in order to connect that line. That would be like the top of our eye. And then I would come down here and I would go back up. And because, like I said, it's 3 stitches high, or 3 spaces high, I would then go down just 1 more space and come back up, and 1 more time. So I'm stitching every single space on the pattern. I'm putting an individual stitch in. And that is backstitching. So backstitching, I'm filling in every single space on the pattern like it's its own individual stitch. There we go. There's our I. But often in patterns with lettering like this, small lettering, backstitch lettering, a lot of times I just prefer the look of long stitches to the backstitching. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the backstitch method. If you want to do all of this in solid backstitch, go for it. It's going to be beautiful. But I just personally really like how it looks with long stitches, especially because some of these letters, like the W, are going to require long stitches because they don't follow the grid lines straight. Just like the swirls, these are all back stitches. Let me pick this up a little bit. These are all back stitches along the tight part of the swirl because they followed perfectly through the squares of the pattern. They're literally only 1 stitching space stitches, but the diagonal cuts over several spaces of stitching, and it doesn't go perfectly through your stitching spaces, like it cuts horizontally through the pattern. And so that's why these have to be long stitches because they don't go perfectly diagonally through the pattern. It makes a bit more sense if you have the pattern in front of you to look at, but yeah, these stitches don't go perfectly through the crosshairs of the pattern, so you can't stitch at every space along the way. You have to make it a one straight line diagonal across. And that's what happens in some of these letters, like in the W. And so then rather than do kind of a combination of backstitching and a long stitch like I did in the swirls, I wanted the lettering to be just all long stitches so it looked a little more uniform. So the way that I did that, let's do the exact same letter. Let's do the I again, but this time we're going to do it in back stitches. So I'm going to start a few spaces away from my other one here. And so I've come up, so instead of going down in the very next stitching space, like I did in this first one here, I'm going to go across the full length of that bar on the pattern. I'm going to treat it like that's just one solid stitch. And so I came all the way across 2 stitches there. Now I'm going to come down, all the way down my 3 stitches. That's the height, because that was a straight row on the pattern. I'm going to come all the way down, and I'm going to go all the way up, and it's going to be one solid stitch. And I'm going to do the bottom the same way. I'm going to come up here, and rather than go down in the middle and make 2 separate stitches, I'm just going to stretch it all the way across and do one solid stitch. So there you go. There is the difference between using long stitches versus back stitches. Again, you can use either method for the A Christmas Carol SAL, whichever one you would prefer. Obviously, the long stitches are going to have the benefit of being a little bit faster as well, because you're just making so many fewer stitches as opposed to the back stitching. So that is one benefit to doing long stitches also. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed the A Christmas Carol SAL. Make sure to check out my other video on how I did the finishing for this project, and I hope that I will see you all next year in 2021 for another year of Stitching Book Club. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you real soon.